our rhythm. The largest announcement at San Diego Comic-Con this year, if you exist on the internet or live on the face of the earth, you've already heard it. Robert Downey Jr. is going to return to the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Avengers Doomsday in the year of our Lord 2026. And he ain't playing Iron Man, folks. He's playing Doctor Doom. So this is one, Greg, that I feel has like at least 5 or 6 layers to like peel back on it, right? Obviously, Marvel does their Marvel Studios panel in Hall H. Hall H, very iconic at San Diego Comic Con. Marvel and DC have been using that thing for many, many years now to make their biggest announcements of the year. And we've had years where Marvel Studios has straight up skipped Hall H when they didn't have a lot of stuff, or maybe they say things for D23. This year, they're like, no, we're coming back. I remember specifically before it, when the panel started, because obviously they don't stream these things. They should really just stream these panels because all the footage is instantly online. People all have their phones out,
Oh
but
yeah, the
that's besides the
phones were
point.
everywhere when I saw that pictures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really no point into not streaming it because those streams would do like 1 million concurrent viewers if they streamed them. But at the beginning of the panel, I believe they said, "Hey, we're focusing on 3 movies today. We're talking about Deadpool and Wolverine, which had just come out, so it was more like a post-release panel, just talking about the movie." They talked about Fantastic Four, and I believe there was one other movie they had in their slate that they talked about. I don't think it was Avengers. I believe Avengers was like a little one more thing they
Didn't
had at
they
the
didn't
end.
they show the logo for like Avengers versus X-Men?
No,
Oh, that must have
they
been
didn't.
fake.
They
There's so
didn't.
much fake stuff that gets come out of there, man. I saw that. I'm like, it looked legit, and I was like, oh, but I didn't hear about it
Hmm.
anywhere. And I'm like, oh,
Well,
then
that
it must
was.
not have been fake.
I think that was one that people were predicting. Everybody was like, "Oh, they're going to announce Avengers X," so people were like mocking up, like fan made logos and stuff, expecting that to be the announcement, and it wasn't there. But the last thing they bring out, they put the Avengers logo up on screen. It turns green. Everybody's like, "Oh shit, what does that mean?" They
Hulk.
walk a bunch of Doom bots out onto stage with like the hoods and masks on, and then one walks to the front. That's the leader. He's got the mask on. He pulls it off. It's Robert Downey Jr. The crowd goes wild, and they announce that they've changed the next Avengers movie. Greg, once upon a time was going to be called Avengers: The Kang Dynasty. This was going to be like the Kang movie, but then Jonathan Majors, who played Kang in Loki and the last Ant-Man movie, he found himself in some legal trouble, bit of a domestic abuse case that he found himself in. So Marvel immediately yanked him right out of that universe. They completely cut that storyline instantly. So we're not doing Kang anymore. That was a bit divisive because I know a lot of people were like, you should just recast the role and keep the storyline. Because obviously, usually never good when you hard pivot in the middle of a storyline in a franchise like that. But they did anyway. They're going to say, freak it, we're bringing in Doctor Doom. And they've brought in everyone's favorite, Robert Downey Jr., to play him. It's a bit confusing on the surface because you're like, hey, he's Iron Man. Obviously, Marvel's been doing the multiverse thing. That's the whole story that they're in right now is called the multiverse saga. So obviously, this is going to be like Tony Stark from Earth 311, where he was evil and became Doctor Doom for whatever reason. I'm sure we'll learn about it in Fantastic Four or something. But it's been a bit divisive, you know? For many years, like, love him or hate him, Marvel is kind of like just completely slam dunked at Comic Con. Most of the time, the Marvel Studios has been there, and they're usually pretty universally beloved when they make these big like slate announcements. But this one was like super split down the middle. Like a lot of the hardcore MCU fans were like, "Hell yes, we love Robert Downey Jr. I love Robert Downey Jr. I was 10 years old when Iron Man came out." But a lot of people were also like, man, this is like such a boring kind of like move. It kind of like reeks of desperation. It's one of those where like obviously Iron Man died. I think a lot of people expected him to show up in a cameo at some point because that's just the era we live in. But it feels a bit soon. He was in the last Avengers movie. So him being in the next one is a bit deflating. And then they also bring the Russo brothers back to direct it, which they did Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. And then that was kind of supposed to be their like mic drop. They were literally like, we're done here. We're gonna do other stuff. They did The Gray Man on Netflix, which everybody hated. I think they had another movie they made that didn't really make a lot of noise. So that also seems kind of like an admission of defeat where they're just like back doing
They
Marvel
did a
movies
TV
again.
series too, right? They did like a
They
spy.
did. I forget the name of it. Yeah, it might have been like an Apple thing, but
Yeah.
nothing they really put out after Endgame. People were all like, "This stuff is kind of whack." Um, so yeah, this is what all the nerds have been arguing about on YouTube, Reddit, and Twitter the last week. Is this good or bad? Um, I know you are a big X-Men person, don't really care much for the MCU, so I'm sure this was not anything that really got you out of bed, but
Mm.
it was one of the most discussed announcements out of SDCC. So
I
Curious to
Yeah,
see how this one shakes out.
I was pretty sure that if the cure for cancer was discovered that day, or if we discovered extraterrestrial life on
Your
Mars, it would
cancer.
have been buried in Robert Downey Jr. comes to MCU, and I don't care, I don't give a shit, I don't care. Like I'm just like this is you're right, it is desperate. Like they gave him $100 million just to star in a movie. So him and The Rock are now the two
Yeah.
highest paid actors in Hollywood. Like, and I haven't watched a really MCU movie since Civil War because that's when I checked out. So I've never seen Infinity War, I've never seen Endgame.
It was
Uh,
great.
and I'm just like, I don't care. Like, I mean, that's just, I'm like, I'm sure I'm one of 5 people that don't care, but it's whatever.
No, there are a lot of people, Greg.
It does reek
There are
of
a lot of people.
desperation, and like the variant thing is very lazy. It's very lazy. Like, I mean, like a multiverse is a fun place to visit, but now you're just in it, and every single time there's something, there's like variant. Oh, that's a variant. So like, so nothing matters. You're telling me in your cinematic universe nothing matters anymore because a variant can just come in and take somebody's place, so it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, exactly. So that's just lazy writing, and comics do that all the time.
I was gonna say that's just the inherent flaw of multiverses in general. Like comics or even in other like books or just sci-fi in general is that the multiverse like just inherently introduces like reduced stakes and whatnot.
I hated that too, but and equally I hated that in comics. Like it's like the death of Batman, and you're like, you're not really killing off Batman. You're never gonna make a Batman comic again. Like really, like so I just whenever
he'll be dead for 3 issues.
Yeah, whenever those lines came out, I just skipped it because there was no point because he would just come back in some bullshit way. You know what I mean? Either they do time travel, or there'd be a clone, or the original one that died was a clone, or some bullshit thing. I remember the Ben Riley. I don't know if you remember the Ben Riley Peter Parker story. You're too young.
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with that.
Yeah,
I know like what happens. In
the schoolyard chat was like, "Who's the clone?" Like, you know, who died? You know, and it turns out that Ben Riley was the real Peter Parker. Spoilers for the 40-year-old, 50-year-old story arc, whatever. And like, if you do that seldomly enough, it's fine. But like with Loki and now Deadpool Wolverine and now this Doomsday and now the Fantastic Four movie, and it's like it's just like it's just lazy writing. You can do whatever you want in your cinematic universe because now there are no consequences because you can just pull in a variant and say everything's better. And that's just, I mean, it's fan. What's funny is that like, why couldn't they have done this earlier, right? Like during the Civil War era, why couldn't they actually do the Civil War comic arc with like multiple characters where the stakes were much higher than just Bucky betraying Iron Man? Like, why couldn't they do like a cataclysmic event that would, you know, make the mutants, or not mutants, but the what do they call them? Enhanced, like enhanced, have like a civil war throughout the entire world instead of just being such a low stake film about an assignment they were on from the government, and then something happened, and then they were like, but they work for the government. They were there in government orders, and just the whole thing just was. The Civil War arc is one of the most interesting arcs in the world to me because it was the first time I read a comic that like applied to like superheroes having consequences for their actions. We always talk about vigilantism, right, and Batman or whatever, not that, but that was a really, and like none of those themes were touched in Civil War. I feel that movie made all of its money because Spider-Man and Black Panther were in that movie. That's why people went to see the movie, because the hero reveals for a hot minute were like the reason you see the movies. Like that's, you want to see the reveal of that Black Panther, you want to see the costume, you want to see the actor portray that character, and I don't know, and I just, and it's not even Victor, it's Iron Man, it's Tony Stark. So like that's even like makes it even like kind of downplayed even more, because like if no one likes this one, they can be like, oh, don't worry, it was a variant, now we can go to the real Victor Von Doom. And it's like, well, then why make the movie? So I just go in this loop of like, you're just doing fan casting hardcore right now because that's the thing, but that's the thing people have done forever. And this MCU thing has been a thing for 15 years, over 15 years. Like it's most trends, I've talked about this, most trends last 10 years, it's gimped on. And this move shows me they don't have faith in Ironheart. They don't have faith in the other shows that they're working on because like they need to do something to rekindle an interest in this universe that has gotten so convoluted and messy for a cinematic universe. You know, like especially since like Deadpool Wolverine, right? This, I've read multiple articles from critics saying this is a great send-off to the MCU, and that's what it should be. But I don't think that's going to be the case. Disney's going to see how much money.
Well, no, it's a send-off to the Fox Marvel universe. Like all the old X-Men movies is definitely what Deadpool Wolverine is. It's like a farewell to that universe of stuff. Now that Disney owns Fox Marvel.
Yeah, that's the case. Like it should be like you end it there, right? But no, I mean, they'll come back because, you know, I mean, what's the budget of this film if you have to pay Robert Downey Jr. $100 million just to be in it, and the Russo brothers probably want another $100 million just to direct it?
It's they're $80 million. That was a part of the. That's the second. I have a second link in there, Greg, about the conversation. Where it says the Russo brothers. I believe it was. I gotta find it again. I believe it was It says yes. So $80 million for the Russo brothers to direct again. And then it just says Robert Downey Jr. is getting paid significantly more than that.
What's that?
So
What's
definitely
significantly? What's the
probably like
number?
120. It's in like the $100 million dollar range, which I saw somebody posted was like that's the entire budget of The Creator, which was the sci-fi movie that came out last year. It was the Rogue One developer. Maybe it was like an original sci-fi
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, like they go on.
Um,
Like I think
yeah.
when we talk about like the universe dying, like this, if this movie comes out and cannot break $1 billion in its opening weekend, I think it's done. I would say that's it. But if it does come out and it makes $1 billion, I mean, like then it continues.
This movie's gonna make a shit ton of money.
Right.
This movie will definitely make a shit ton of money. I will not bet against the movie with the Avengers in the title not making $1 billion
With RDJ and the
getting
credit on the thing,
yeah.
right? Like that's the
Mhm.
the big sell. Yeah.
Yeah, and at this point, this movie's coming out in 2026. Endgame was 2019. It'll have been 7 years between Avengers movies at that point. That'll be the longest gap. With the Avengers movies, people are gonna be frothing at the mouth to see that. I don't know how great it'll be, but people are gonna flock to go see it. Yeah, I think that the multiverse stuff is just so interesting, man, because for so many years, that was like the thing people were like dying to see. Like MCU fans were like, please, like do all like they were like, there's such a deep well of like crossover content in comics that you can do with the multiverse stuff. And they finally did the multiverse saga. I think it was really cool for a handful of movies. But I do think people got worn down on it really quickly. And now they're kind of locked into the storyline until Secret Wars, because they're doing this is 2026 is Avengers Doomsday, then 2027 is Secret Wars. And that's supposed to be like the break. That's supposed to be the cutoff for the multiverse stuff, and that's supposed to be the start of the next phase, whatever the hell that'll be. Probably X-Men movies, if I had to guess. But yeah, even I though, somebody who likes the crossover stuff, it doesn't really move me as much anymore. I like Deadpool and Wolverine, but a lot of it I was just like,
I mean,
yep,
I think I'll like
yeah,
it too. I mean, everything's been spoiled on the
those.
internet for me. Like you just scrolling through, and it's just
Dude,
like
they have. I
this
saw that
person's
thing.
cameo because like half the movie is just like these 5-second microbursts of multiverse scenes, and they're all over the internet. And you're just like, okay, yeah, all right, cool, all right. Like,
Yeah. So it's one of those things, and I don't know if you remember hearing this, but they were kind of teasing this recently because I know RDJ was doing like interviews for other movies he's been in. The dude just won an Oscar last year for Oppenheimer. Um, and people kept asking him, like, oh, would you go back to the MCU? And he's like, yeah, maybe, why not? And everyone was like, that's weird. Like,
they give me
usually,
a big
these
bag of
actors kind
money.
of yeah. So I mean, obviously at the times people were asking him that, he probably had already agreed. That contract was probably already signed for him to come back because these deals aren't done the night before Comic-Con. Um, so yeah, I mean, hey, like I said, I love Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. I was 10 years old when the first Iron Man movie came out. Big fan of his performance in those movies. I was emotional when Iron Man died. The little funeral with the proof that Tony Stark has a heart drifting down the river. I thought that was very well done. I think that he's made some very good movies there. I think that the Doctor Doom thing is weird. I don't know if it'll be good. I mean, there's a possibility it'll be decent, but I do just kind of look forward to a lot of the stuff being over. My thing is, I'm a part of the group that I just wish they would have recast Kang. I just hate that an abuse trial for the actor who was supposed to play this next villain has caused them to completely redirect the entire universe of movies when Marvel's recast people before. They recast not Bucky, Rhodey when Terrence Howard didn't want to take whatever contract they were giving him. They just cast Don Cheadle to play him. You could have got so many actors. I wouldn't have seen John Boyega as Kang. I was like, that would have been great. Now maybe he didn't want to work with Disney after Star Wars, but somebody you could have gotten a nice young black actor out there to replace Kang and just be the next version. That character already has it pre-installed in his lore that he's got like a million variants. So
Oh, they hate
I just
recasting. You're right there. They hate doing it, and I think
but they've done it.
audiences.
I don't know. I feel like they've
No,
done it before. I think people get over. I think they overrate how big of a deal it is when you recast a character.
no, I absolutely agree. I think there's that initial like jerk reaction, but then like after like 1 or 2 movies, you're like, oh, yeah, it's fine. Like it's that the initial jerk they don't want to deal with, the knee jerky. I can't believe they're gonna recast this certain. It's like whatever, dude. Like, and that goes into something even like to tie into that. It's just the storytelling. Like this is less
Mhm.
about like people are already gonna go see the movie just because RDJ, but like what happened to the storytelling elements? Like these movies don't have storytelling
Mhm.
elements. They go see them for hero reveals and recasting things and the action sequences, and that sucks. I just feel like it
Mhm.
hurts. There was a director that said a quote. Let me see if I can find it. Um,
About what?
how cinematic universes hurt storytelling. Hurt because I don't want to miss do this.
Mm.
But no, like you're right. Like they should just recast.
They should have.
Like
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like why not? Like that's okay. Like just do the thing you're doing right now. Oh, it's a variant. Like you know what I mean? Just he kills the other guy and he's the more evil one or whatever. Like you could easily do that, but they don't want to.
I think that behind the scenes, they were probably already panicking because last year, beginning of the year, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania came out, and that was the movie that was like our first actual look at Kang. That's like the movie he shows up, he's a villain in the third act of that movie. The whole end of that movie is setting up the stakes of like, oh shit, this dude has been unleashed and he's coming for everything. And that movie was so bad and people hated it. And I think the response to that, they were probably already starting to get cold feet about the Kang storyline. And then I think that those domestic abuse charges came out against that actor, and they were probably just like, "That's it." They were probably, you know what? Let's just wash our hands of this whole fucking thing and just move on. Because I do wonder if people had loved the last Ant-Man movie and it made $1 billion and people were going crazy for Kang. I do think maybe in that case they would have recast, but I think they wouldn't admit it. But I think behind the scenes they were probably already starting to kind of regret or question that plot direction, and that the legal stuff probably made it easier for them to just be like, "Fuck it, we're done here."
Yeah, this was the interview with
Oh, it was
the
James
Logan.
Mangold.
Yeah, he's just said he wasn't like saying it sucks or it's shit or anything. He just said that it hurts. Like people are so focused on the interconnectivity in the next movie, right? Like you're not focused on the storytelling, and you can see that in our culture with MCU movies. Like you leave the movie, you're talking about the end credit scene, not the movie, and that's a mistake. You should be talking about the movie, not the 5-second scene afterwards. Right. And I think that's like the big cardinal sin of Marvel movies. And it speaks loads of our culture. We live in a TikTok world, right? People are scrolling, getting that instant gratification. If you look at Deadpool, there's those sequences that are like TikTok, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds. Like it's a different demographic now that want to see different things in movies. Right. And that's just the harsh reality of it is we're getting old. This type of storytelling is getting put away, and now we're getting this new storytelling. What do you think? It's good or bad? Whatever, it's subjective, right? But like, there's no denying. You look at the TikTok algorithm and how people interact with that platform, and look at those scenes in Deadpool, and they're very similar. Donovan, they're that instant gratification of a 5-second scene, and the next instant gratification of a 5-second scene. Like it's also scary because like I feel like they're dissecting our digital footprint is being dissected and broken down into like an Excel sheet, and then they're hitting those marks right on a sheet to make sure that we get that gratification we want to get that cheering moment. You know what I mean? I've seen the clips of like every single time Deadpool hopped to a different dimension. I won't spoil what he's hopping to, but crowd cheered. Next scene, crowd cheered. Next scene, crowd cheered. Like you're just hitting that pleasure button again and again and again and again. And I was just like, damn, that's a lot like TikTok. That's a lot like shorts when people just scroll to get that instant gratification. So like I could see where he's coming from, but I think we're just witnessing a generational shift in how movies are made and stories are told. Like that's just what it is. I mean, we'll all experience that. The people who are watching that movies now as kids will experience that in 30 years too. They'll be like, "Oh man, I wish it was like this again." Like it's just a cycle, and we're witnessing it because the cycle is much shorter this time around. Before it was like 20 years, 30 years. Now it's like every 10 years. So I just. I do think it's interesting. Like it's a definitely interesting point of study. Like if I was teaching a film course, I would want to like do the evolution of film and storytelling specifically for blockbuster movies. Like you look at Jurassic Park, right? That movie's phenomenal. One of the greatest movies of all times. It made a ton of money, had great effects, good story, good characters, right? It was a complete package. And you look at something like, I don't know, like Wolverine and Ant-Man, right? It's just a movie that you go to see to spend 2 hours, and it makes money, sure. But like, it's not going to be a Jurassic Park. It's not going to be something puts on their shelf and studies 20 years from now. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting time as a cinephile, like especially like you're in the A24 bandwagon too, which is amazing because they're doing that type of storytelling still. There's still a market for that, but it's definitely getting harder to sell a movie like that when you have like, Doomsday around the corner. It's definitely harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a fascinating question. There's just so many like angles to the Marvel conversation. The other movie they talked about that I forgot to mention was the new Captain America, the one with Falcon, Brave New World with
Brave New
Harrison
World.
Ford's the president and all that.
We play the trailer.
But even during that panel, like the actor who plays the leader, who was in not the original, but the 2008 Hulk movie, early MCU days, he had a quote about like Marvel stuff where he was like, hey guys, you know, like the MCU like kept cinema alive during the pandemic and stuff. So and then people are like, well, that's not true. And then there's arguments you made where people are like, hey man, there are a lot of theaters that are still open because these movies make like $1 billion every year. And then you could also the artistry of it. There's so much. One day there's going to be like a 14-hour documentary about all this that I can't wait to watch. It is such a fascinating thing to look at. I definitely see both sides of the matter. I love movies in general. I do love my indie stuff. I'm gonna go see M. Night Shyamalan's Trap tomorrow. I'll go see Cuckoo next weekend. I love all the stuff, but I also do like my blockbusters. I do like Marvel movies. So I'm curious how these movies turn out. I don't have high hopes, but I am curious just as a fan of film and a fan of the franchise. But yeah, I'm sure we're going to talk about it many more times until it comes out.
No, for sure. And this is an interesting point of discussion right now, just to say, because I'm witnessing this. It doesn't bode well for the internet either. So this Screen Culture YouTube channel, I'm playing the new Brave New World trailer. It's blocked because it realizes my system is streaming, so it just won't play. It's just black. It's black for the stream, but I see it on my screen. This is This is very scary though, because like, what about fair use? What if I want to dissect this trailer? What if we want to talk, like we're talking about it, right? We are in our legal right to stream it without audio, to talk over it and analyze it, but like we're not allowed. Like that's dangerous too.
Why don't you go to the Marvel Studios upload?
I just think that's crazy. That was just the first one that popped up, because it's never the first.
I mean, I don't know the Screen Culture is, but I'm sure.
I mean, like that is very wonky. Okay, but like that, but that's scary though that they can do that. Like, just imagine a world where corporations can pick and choose what you, as journalists, it's like what we critique and what we are able to review and what we're able to show. Like that's not journalism. That's a show. But no, yeah. Brave New World, Harrison Ford coming back. People were excited. We should talk about that a little bit, because Harrison Ford showed more energy on like a stage than he has in like 20 years of his career.
That was funny. I saw people were like, they're like, Harrison Ford is always excited to be in anything that's not Star Wars. But yeah, I saw that clip where he goes on stage and he does like the Hulk roar, whatnot. It's funny. I saw there was a clip, because it was after the panel, they were doing like carpet interviews, and somebody asked him about like the phases of the MCU, like something about like his preference. There's something about like
they asked him about like, if you were an anchor, like in the Depp universe, there's an anchor in every universe. What universe would you be the anchor in? And he's like, I don't know, and he walked off.
Somebody quoted it and was like, asking Harrison Ford about anchor beings in the MCU is elder abuse. They were like, you should be allowed to ask him this.
Some of those questions for him were terrible. I could have thought of 20 more questions that would have been amazing to ask him, and like, you waste a question and he just walks off. I'm like, that's awful. Like, you wasted a Harrison Ford question.
I just wouldn't ask him about the MCU. I mean, he hates talking about all these big franchises. Even Star Wars, and people ask him about like Jedi and stuff, he's like, what the hell are you talking about? Which I think is hilarious. Because obviously these actors are not always nerds for this stuff. And a lot of times they don't care as much as you do. In fact, in most cases, they probably don't. So I always think, I love how blunt he is though, with this stuff. But yeah, he was energetic on stage. I saw Anthony Mackie was excited. There was a scene where he was yelling. He's like, tell Tom, like, I got fucking Harrison Ford in my movie. They were running around on stage, so that'll be fun. Sure, Captain America comes out in February.
I didn't see him talk at the panel, but was he like, you have the Marvel movie, you just gotta really get in there, and and Luke, watch out, Chewbacca, just stay there, and it's the thing you do, like, because he mumbles. There's an impersonator that does him very well, but like he over exaggerates the mumble. Voice. But no, that drives me nuts, because like, as a journalist who interviews people, like, you could ask them so many different questions that were in his wheelhouse. Like, oh, you've done so many movies, you've done action, you've drama, and then you name a couple, like, The Fugitive and some of his like more drama roles that aren't popcorny or out, like, things like, would you do any of those movies differently? Would you take any other, were there any point in your career that you would have changed? Whether a movie role or a role you took or a role you turned down, like, there's something he can talk about, right? Don't ask him about anchor universes in the MCU. He's not going to know anything. He doesn't give a shit like about that. Like,
well, now, I mean, people probably do it now because that goes viral, because now it's like a known thing. If you ask Harrison Ford these nerdy questions, he's going to tell you to go fuck yourself. And it's always like, always does well on social media when he reacts like that. But yeah, I would ask him about Air Force One. I'm like, this isn't the first time he played a president in a movie.
That's a good question. That's a good question. What's the key to playing a good presidential role? Like, that's a great question. And you know what I mean? Like, and he'd be like, I don't know, you just gotta really go in there and you just gotta be very fortuitous, and
he'd be like, the president doesn't do anything, so neither do I.
Right. Yeah. Dude, how much you want to get? He gets to show up on set and just do whatever he wants because he's Harrison Ford. You don't get to direct him. Oh, I only do 2 takes. And then like that, he just walks off.
Maybe
He can do that. He's Harrison Ford, and
maybe.
I'm not. That's the caveat.
Yeah. I like Harrison Ford. I'm a big fan of his, and I like seeing him do all this.
He's got great, dude. The dude has been in so much
okay.
stuff, but like I feel you when you say like it always goes back to Han Solo. Like he's done so many movies,
Yeah,
and it's always Han Solo or Indiana Jones. Those are the two things that that just haunt him. And like Mark Hamill has done interviews where he talks about like the perspective of like becoming that level of fame. Like there's a great interview with he talks about they go to a toy store and he's like, oh my god, look, like Harrison, like we're action figures, and he goes, yeah, that really sucks. Like he's just like there's just a different level. It's just he's an actor, you know. He's an actor that became a celebrity unwillingly. I don't know. It's interesting. He's interesting career. Lots of variety.